Prepping for a competitive exam? Then there's one name you absolutely need to know: Ray Dalio. His whole theory on economic cycles isn't just some abstract idea. It's a predictable pattern that shows up on exams again and again. So let's break down exactly what you need to know to absolutely ace those questions.
So here's the big question we're tackling today. Is there some kind of hidden pattern that connects the fate of ancient empires with the economies we're all living in right now? Well, according to Ray Dalio, the answer is a huge yes, and it's a cycle that just keeps repeating throughout history.
Look, if you want to succeed on your exam, you have got to lock in the key points of this framework. Our goal here is to master this pattern, so let's get straight into it.
All right, first up, we're diving into the foundation of Dalio's entire theory, the six-stage economic cycle. Getting this sequence right is absolutely critical, so pay close attention.
Now listen up, because here's a huge exam tip for you. You will almost certainly be asked to arrange these 6 stages in the correct order. So let's walk through it. It all starts with a new world order, which then moves into a growth phase and peak prosperity. That's followed by financial imbalances and conflict, until finally the whole cycle just resets itself.
Okay, let's get the official textbook definition for Stage 1, the New World Order. This usually kicks in right after a major conflict, like World War II, and it establishes a new dominant global power and a new reserve currency, like the US dollar. This is the official starting line for the cycle.
The next 2 stages? This is where the good times roll. We're talking about the growth phase and peak prosperity. Opportunities are everywhere, new wealth is being created, and living standards are on the rise. It's basically the boom time.
So that brings up a really common question, right? If things are so great, why don't they just stay that way forever? It's a classic misconception, and the answer is what triggers the big turning point of the cycle. And boom, here's a classic trap you have got to watch out for on your exams. Don't fall for the idea that the good times last forever. In reality, that peak prosperity actually plants the seeds of its own downfall. You see rising debt, big wealth gaps, and asset bubbles. And here's the critical turning point: when debt starts growing faster than income. That's when the whole system gets unstable.
So what happens next? All those imbalances, they eventually lead to social unrest and serious challenges from rival powers. The system just can't handle the pressure anymore, and it forces a reset. Debts get restructured, a new system begins, and then, the entire 6-stage cycle kicks off all over again.
Okay, so we know the cycle can end in conflict, but how does that actually happen? Dalio says it's not a sudden thing. Instead, he outlines 5 types of pre-war conflict that follow a predictable path he calls the escalation ladder.
You absolutely have to pay close attention to the order of this escalation ladder. It starts off with trade wars, then it ramps up to tech wars, then capital wars, and then geopolitical wars. Only after all of that, as a final resort, does it become a full-blown military war.
Now here's something that trips people up all the time on multiple choice questions. What's the difference between trade and capital wars? Just remember this: trade wars are about physical goods, think tariffs and export bans. Capital wars, on the other hand, are all about finance, think sanctions and freezing assets. It's a small difference, but it's a critical one for your exam.
Struggling to remember that order? No worries. Just use this simple acronym, TTCGM. That stands for Trade, Tech, Capital, Geo, and Military. It's a fantastic memory trick to have in your back pocket when you're under pressure.
All right, let's move on to Section 3. Now, out of all the things driving this cycle, Dalio says the debt crisis is by far the most dangerous part. This is really where the internal pressures hit a boiling point.
Just to give you a sense of the scale of this problem, check out this number. When a country's debt to GDP ratio climbs over 120%, as it has for the US, that's a massive red flag. Dalio sees this as a key sign that a country is deep in the late stages of the cycle.
So how does a debt crisis get so bad that it spirals out of control? Well, it's a 4-step process, and each step leads directly to the next. First, the government's deficit gets way too big. Second, they start printing money to cover it. Third, all that new money devalues the currency, which causes inflation. And fourth, they have to print even more money, which just creates this vicious repeating cycle.
And this quote from Ray Dalio himself really drives the point home. The consequences of this aren't just some abstract economic theory. It means real people, future generations, are going to be stuck paying off today's debts with money that's worth a whole lot less.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. Now it's time to lock it all in. Let's do a final rapid-fire recap to make sure you're totally prepped for your exam. Let's boil this all down to 4 key takeaways. Number 1, economies follow a predictable 6-stage cycle. Number 2, this cycle is driven by the rise and fall of debt. Number 3, conflicts escalate through 5 predictable stages. And number 4, today's high debt levels strongly suggest we are in a late stage of the current cycle.
And if you remember nothing else from this, remember these 3 things for your exam. First, memorize the order of the 6 stages.
Second, know the difference between the types of economic warfare, trade, tech, and capital wars. And third, the main trigger for the cycle's reset is always when debt starts growing faster than income.
Okay, before we do a practice question, take a look at this exam points box. This thing boils everything down to the absolute essentials, and even gives you a handy conclusion you can use in a longer answer. It's perfect for that last-minute cram session. All right, you ready? Time to put what you've learned to the test. Here is a typical multiple-choice question you might see on an exam. Which of these options correctly lists the first 3 stages of the economic cycle? Go ahead, take a second and think back to that sequence we talked about.
And the correct answer is B. The cycle kicks off with a New World Order, then it moves into the growth phase, and finally culminates in peak prosperity. How'd you do? Hopefully you nailed it.
And that's our breakdown of Dalio's economic cycles. Look, this is a super powerful framework, not just for crushing your exam, but for making sense of the headlines you see every single day. Keep these stages in mind, and you'll be ready for any question that comes your way. Good luck!